When we think about the structure of the Bible, it's usually Old Testament and New Testament, or chapter and verse. But there's another hidden way to think about the structure of the book, the structure of its meaning. It's a structure that we can map, and that can reveal how different concepts in the Bible get used by different groups of people across time. People have been trying to understand the Bible's semantic structure, or the structure of its meaning, since it was written. In 1230, Hugh of Sancerre, a French friar, developed the first verbal index of the Bible, making a list of each word in the text and where it appears. These sorts of lists allow a reader to encounter the Bible beyond just the narrative, through the occurrence of certain words. But like any index, the specific meaning of that word gets lost on the page because it's been stripped of its context. For example, take the word red. We usually think of it in association with green and yellow, so its meaning we think is related to a color palette. But when red is found with the words communist or brigade, we know that its meaning is related to a political palette. Another way to sketch out the Bible's structure while maintaining the specific meaning of words is to look for terms that appear together over a particular unit of text. We could say a paragraph or a chapter, but these vary in size and in length. So instead we chose a floating window of 5 verses that we slide through like a musical score. As you move on, you drop the previous verse. This allows us to capture the idea that co-occurrences between terms that fall in the same verse are more meaningful than co-occurrences between terms that are several verses apart. Once we do that, we can group the words that appear together into categories and map them in space. In this case, we took 1,000 keywords from the Bible that are related because they appear close to each other within our window. Then we plotted that relation in a map. So we can see that there are 2 distinct regions here, and they're separated by a major partition. Broadly speaking, the world of what we might call moral action is situated on the right, while the story the Bible tells us is on the left. These clusters capture a lot of the themes of the text, but when we take a closer look, we can also learn something about the meaning of individual words. In the same way that red has a different meaning when it's found around political words, we can tell, visually, that the meaning of a word or phrase in the Bible is connected to the words that it's found with. Take a look at the phrase female servants. This cluster also contains the words cattle, flock, and camels. This isn't a mistake. These are all the things that men subjugate. Which is to say that in the Bible, female servants are not co-located with male servants, which are in the cluster war and hierarchy, or in the cluster wives and daughters, but instead with animals. They're seen as the equivalent to beasts of burden, things without agency of their own. The meaning of the Bible is a particularly important case because competing readings or interpretations have led to bitter disputes and the imprisonment and slaughter of those who've been found to interpret biblical meaning differently. So it's important for us to think about the Bible's structure as it exists not only on the page, but how it's been put to use in people's lives. Around the time of the restoration of the monarchy in 1660, England was experiencing a dramatic period of religious conflict. Dissenting groups like the Presbyterians, the Congregationalists, and the Methodists split off from the Anglican Church, while the Anglicans pursued all forms of state repression against them. As these groups spread, so did their message, and thousands of sermons were delivered each week across England by both dissenting and Anglican ministers. In 1753, a vicar in Oxfordshire created an index of those sermons in a book called The Preacher's Assistant. Over the years, his work was expanded to include over 24,000 sermons, 5,000 preachers, 6,000 unique themes, and 7,000 verses. And the result is a data set, which connects preachers to the themes and verses of their sermons from 1660 to 1782. With these data, we can tell a lot about how these groups viewed the world through the Bible, how they put it to use in different ways. The 2 most salient themes for dissenters, what we might broadly call providence and justification, reflect their concern with salvation and judgment, while the Anglicans were more oriented toward the worldly, and we see rebellion, smallpox, and the practical aspects of a good Christian life. We can take this a step further and merge our map of the Bible with the contested uses of it. So we start with the structure, but replace the frequency of words in each part of the Bible with the cumulated number of times a word appears in a chapter that's cited either by a dissenter or an Anglican sermon. So red indicates a higher frequency of use by dissenters, while blue indicates a higher frequency by Anglicans. And now we can use the map to understand how dissenters and Anglicans read the Bible very differently. So let's take another look at the position of women within the map. In the cluster called vices and virtues, we've got terms related to law and truth. We see guilt, prudence, and humility. But just nearby we have another cluster, and these are predominantly the sins of or relating to women: witchcraft, harlotry, coveting, adultery. When we add back in the heat map, we can see that the Anglicans, again in blue, were more likely to include some of these particular themes in their sermons than dissenters, which tells us that Anglicans were more concerned with controlling women, and suggests why some denominations today continue to suppress women's autonomy. And lastly, this type of analysis gives us a new, visual understanding of the Bible, which reveals it as not only multivalent, but also beautiful.